So do I make you wanna run away with me? Do I really make you feel like you don't need anyone?
Hi folks, it's Gary here. Phil's behind the camera today. So we had an experience this past week that I thought might be something that some of our viewers might want to hear. And it's something that I certainly needed to learn. As many of you might know, I have to kind of give you some history here, some personal history. I was raised in small town Oklahoma, north central Oklahoma. I was born in 1951, and so I was raised there in the 1950s and 60s primarily, and into the early 70s. And homosexuality was something that was not only not talked about, it was very frowned upon. What little bit was said about it. And so I did not come out to myself or to anybody else until I was in my late 30s. I left Tulsa in 1990 and moved to Las Vegas. And I had come out to myself in Tulsa, but I did not come out to my family. My family was, and still is, very fundamentalist Christian and very adamant about their religion. And I knew that when I came out to them, most of them, if not all of them, would have a lot of difficulty in accepting me and my orientation. So that's after I had come out about 2 years before I left Tulsa. And I decided that it would be best if I left Oklahoma completely, left family behind, and put some distance between us so that I could hide, if you will, my sexuality. I didn't come out to my family until the mid-1990s. I came out to my mother. My dad and I never really discussed it, but he knew that I was gay. He had met one of my current partners when he came to visit us in Las Vegas, and he just wasn't comfortable talking about it, so we didn't talk about it. There wasn't any negativity, there wasn't any positivity, there was just total neutrality as far as my father was concerned. As far as my mother and other family members that I had contact with, I was correct in my assumption in that I was completely shut out. I was told what a horrible person I was, what a heathen I was, what was going to happen to me in the next life, et cetera, et cetera. And so I kept the distance that I had set. It took several years before my mother finally came around to accepting me, accepting Phil as a family member, and accepting to a large extent my sexuality. Again, like I say, that took years. In the process, I kept a distance from all of my other relatives just to be safe for me, just to be safe. And what brought this video about is that this past week, Phil and I drove from here. We now live in Palm Springs. We drove to Utah to visit my niece and her family. Her husband, her 3 adult children also live in the same area in Utah. So I got to see all of them. I hadn't seen any of them for a little over 7 years. As a matter of fact, I'd only seen them once since I came out, and that was at a family function in Oklahoma, and my sexuality was not discussed at all at that point in time. So I didn't know what their viewpoint was, really. I just assumed that it would be negative like everybody else's in my family. But after we moved to Las Vegas, my niece and nephew, who live in Utah, like I said, occasionally come to California. He has a business where he spends some time in Utah and some time in California. And shortly after Phil and I moved to Las Vegas, my niece and her husband were coming to California to do their business. They were only about an hour and a half's drive from Palm Springs, where Phil and I live. So I had made contact with my niece, and they had decided that they wanted to come and visit us. So they did. They were completely, totally open and honest and accepting of not only myself and my sexuality, but also with Phil being in their life as well. And it was an eye-opening experience for me. I was still a little leery, but nonetheless, they came and visited. We had a wonderful visit, and then we parted ways. 2 or 3 months later, we met them again for lunch outside of our home in a resort area that's kind of between our two homesteads here in California. And we met again, and we again had a wonderful time. So I was developing this relationship with my niece and her husband, and my husband, Phil. They started asking us to please come visit them in Utah. I said, everybody wants to meet Phil, everybody wants to see me, everybody wants to open this dialogue and this relationship. So this past week, that's where Phil and I went. We went to visit my niece in rural central Utah. Had an absolutely incredible time. We spent 4 days, actually 5 with driving, with my niece and her 3 adult children, their spouses and or significant others, and between them, their 3 children, which I had never even met, that are 1, 2, and 3 years old. It's hard to describe. It was a very moving experience that I could actually make contact with blood relative family members openly and honestly with not only myself, but myself and my husband, and be totally accepted and not questioned or not judged in any way, shape, or form. The first full day we were there, Phil was still resting, and my niece and I went on a little trail in a razor up the mountain, and we were totally by ourselves, alone. And it was absolutely beautiful. We got to talk about all kinds of family things and other things, on a personal level. I had never opened up to her before. Now she's in her early 50s. And we finally got to this one place where it was very serene and very scenic. And I asked her to pull over, and I apologized to her. I said, there's been a distance between me and the family, and I think you know why most of it's there, but I wanted to apologize specifically to you because I'm the one that put the distance between me and your family. And obviously, I had no real reason to do that. I made assumptions that I would be accepted by you like I was virtually everybody else in the family. And I said, because of that, I kept distance from you and kept distance from your family, and I've been virtually absent in you raising your children and then them getting married and developing their lives and starting their families. And of course, she said I didn't need to apologize, that she understood where I was coming from, but I had to say that. I had to get that off of my chest. I had to let her know that I knew exactly what had transpired and why, and that I was taking responsibility for that. We got to spend a lot of time with her youngest daughter and her 3-year-old, and we got to spend a good bit of time with my nephew and his girlfriend. And on the next to the last day we were there, I got to finally meet the family of my oldest great niece, who also lives in the same general area. So we had made an appointment to go see them because they're a busy family, and we were busy. So I got to make visit with my oldest great niece and meet her husband and her 2 children. She has a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. And they got to meet Phil for the first time. We had an absolutely amazing visit. The kids were wonderful. They accepted us immediately. Mom and Dad accepted us immediately. There was no hesitation, no hiding of feelings. We talked very openly and frankly. So after we wrapped up our visit with my oldest great niece, we went back to my nieces and her husbands. And the next day, I got an incredibly sweet, wonderful text from my oldest great niece, telling Phil and I how meaningful it was for us to come visit her and take the time that we had to spend with her and her family and get to know them. And it was wonderful, a wonderfully worded, beautiful, heartfelt text that she sent. So I sent back to her the same thing that I talked to her mom about. And I apologized for the distance that I had put between us, between Phil and I, and mostly me, and them and her family. And I didn't really go into detail as to why. She pretty well understood. But in reflecting upon the time that we got to spend there and the type of relationship that we got to start to develop with family, I really felt like I wanted to do this video and put it out there and have it be something that you can think about, you can ponder. I realize I made mistakes during that coming out process, during that hiding process, and it was a mistake for me to handle it the way that I did. I'm so thankful and so grateful that I and Phil have the opportunity now to kind of undo that mistake. I can't undo it, but I can negate it. And we can overcome it, and we can continue to develop and to build this relationship with one of my family members. I'm not saying this is right for everybody. I'm not saying this is the way you do it. I'm saying this is what happened to me. This is why it happened to me. I understand that. I recognize that. I accept that, and I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for the learning opportunity that we were given. So I think what I want to say is it was real easy for me just to walk away, just to walk away and distance myself and say, okay, I'm done with this. I'm not going to deal with it. But with persistence and patience and listening and understanding, we are developing a relationship that will be very meaningful for us, not only now, but also in our future. We've mended the relationship with my mother, and now we've developed the relationship with my niece, and it's been a very meaningful experience. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Best wishes. Subscribe. Phil says subscribe.